All right, welcome back to the Pooch Kick Podcast.
Kick them pooches.
My name's Carl,
My name's Sam.
and we are here to give you the rankings for positions in the AFC North.
Don't kick the pooches.
Don't kick the Pooches. It's very bad. It's just a name. Please
Unless
don't
you're a
follow it.
professional, don't kick the pooches. You
Exactly.
have to be a professional pooch kicker.
With permits. Alrighty, getting on into it. We always start out with quarterbacks. So
This is going to be a hot take one for some people.
This one is going to be a pretty hot take for a lot of people that...
I really want to move my 3 and 2. I'm not going to lie. I really want to,
Wow,
but I'm not going to.
You're not going to. You're not going to. You're not going to.
All
All right, so
you know what? I'm gonna.
No, don't you do it. Don't you do it. I don't think it's a surprise that we agree on who the number one quarterback in the division is. It is the NFL reigning MVP, Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, so I just want to go on the record here. For everybody who talks about Lamar this, Lamar that, go watch his development from year 1 to year 2. Amazing. Watch his development from the start of last year to the end of last year. Amazing. He can throw the ball. People just don't like different. People want Patrick Mahomes, this prototype pocket passer, and Lamar is different. So I think that Lamar is going to do what Mike Vick couldn't do, which is stay healthy and play in a league that challenges him. I don't even want to knock on wood. I know he will. The league forced Michael Vick, and I say Michael Vick a lot because that's,
That's the instant comparison, obviously.
they forced Michael Vick to be something he wasn't. And we've seen that Baltimore has said, no, we're going to do what they didn't. And 20 years later, Lamar is torching it. I don't think that you win MVP without being talented.
Well, obviously. Yeah.
Now, so, people cite, Cam Newton, who had injuries afterwards, but Cam Newton was a talented quarterback. Matt Ryan, talented quarterback, albeit inconsistent at times. They've had a lot of coaching change there and instability on defense, but Matt Ryan is still a talented quarterback. Lamar is a talented quarterback. I watched him decimate bad teams and beat good teams. It's not all him. So the loss at Tennessee there was more at it than just he didn't make some of these plays. But that's my defense of him. I'm a huge Lamar fan. I'll admit it, that maybe people think I might be biased. He's the best quarterback in this division.
Yeah.
Don't come at me with an aging Big Ben. I don't want to say aging, an aged Big Ben. And a Baker Mayfield, who I believe has a ton of talent. I love Baker Mayfield. I think that last year will stain his reputation for a few years, but I think that he's going to get back on track, and he's going to kill it. And we're going to watch great Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson games in like 4 years when they're just blasting each other for who wins the division.
But I think you're right, though, or I think you're right to point out the fact that Big Ben is still the number 2 quarterback in this league just because of what he's accomplished.
If Baker had a better season last year, this isn't hard to say that Baker's the second best.
Yeah, I would still disagree a little bit. I mean, Big Ben's won 2 Super Bowls. He has always been there, hanging around in the AFC. Maybe not in the past few years as, I would say, productively. I think they've not been the threat to the Patriots and other like really they haven't been a threat to the Patriots, who have been the predominant AFC team for the past couple of years. And then the Ravens were there for a few years, and the Ravens and the Steelers had some of the best battles of all time. And I think that is why we have to give Ben Roethlisberger 2.
So
I think it's based off of what he's done and what I think he can do this season. And that's, I think he'll put up a lot of air numbers, but I just think the team is going to struggle that just enough where they might not make the playoffs, and if they do make the playoffs, it'll be a loss in the wild card.
Yeah, so I think, like you said, we have Big Ben at 2. I think this is a lot of talent. This is the worst personnel I think he's played with since he's come to this team.
Exactly.
The last time we saw him, he had Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell. Although that might have been the season Bell held out. But he still had Antonio Brown. James Conner, who was his most successful season. I really think that this came down to me for the fact Big Ben is old now. Big Ben's had an amazing career, 2 Super Bowls. He'll be in the Hall of Fame, 5,000 yard, whatnot. Eventually, it stops.
Eventually, yeah.
And I'm looking at this coming season. I think Baker has a ton of potential. I think people point to last year as a he's not actually good. We don't examine the fact that Freddie Kitchens had no idea what he was doing. You had a young quarterback learning the NFL. You don't set the rookie touchdown record for nothing.
Yeah.
So we both agree that Baker's at 3 here. I want to move him to 2, but myself will not let myself do it because We know what Big Ben is. I'm really interested to see if Big Ben still has anything in him still. I'm really doubtful that he's going to be this 5,000-yard passer.
I mean, at 38, I mean, he still probably has, if stays healthy, 2 more years left in him. I don't see him being one of those quarterbacks that goes past 40. But
I don't even know
don't,
if he plays past this season.
I'm in agreement with that because that injury to the elbow is something that is.
He got a baseball injury.
Yeah, he got a terrible injury for his position and his age.
Have you seen that? He's throwing
but
the ball.
He is chucking that ball down the field.
Tank. Like,
he is a tank.
You do not see people like him anymore.
Yeah, you just don't see quarterbacks built like him. Immobile, but will not go down with any slight touch.
Yeah, so then we move to 3 here at Cleveland, and I have a lot of faith in Baker. I think that there was explanations for what happened last year. There were interceptions that were his fault, but I went through and I was watching those interceptions play by play, and about half of those were on the receiving end of that. I mean, I watched players pop the ball up, just not fight for the. I mean, I watched people almost abandon that team because of Freddie Kitchens, and it was weird to see because of how excited we all were for them last offseason. I think that they got overhyped, and so everybody laughed at them when they failed. I think this year they'll succeed more. Kevin Stefanski, I think, is a better coach than Freddie Kitchens, although we'll see. We'll get into my thoughts on what that hiring is a little later. But I think Baker's going to have a good year. I don't think, he's not going to throw for 4,000 yards, but I think if you told me him and Big Ben had similar stats at the end of the season, I wouldn't be surprised. I think both of them probably throw something around 3,000 yards, maybe 26, 27 touchdowns, maybe 30, and like 12 interceptions.
I think it's respectable numbers for any quarterback in the AFC North.
Yes, I mean, I think that these are inverses of quarterbacks. I think Baker's on the rise with a new team that wants to run more, and Big Ben is at the decline end of his career. But I know Big Ben can do one thing, which is throw the ball. Yeah. So even at this, delayed state, it's not like he's lost a part of his game. Him, Tom Brady, they throw the ball. They don't run a whole lot. They throw it. So I still think that Big Ben does have an advantage against age there, like Drew Brees. Like, they don't run a whole lot. He throws the ball.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So, I mean, I guess that is a fair argument to why Big Ben would stay at 2. Is that if Big Ben can have a decent season, he's probably, him and Baker, I'd say, finish about the same.
Yeah. And I think it's no question it. It's the unproven Joe Burrow. We're not going to say he's terrible because he hasn't shown that he's terrible.
We just don't know.
He's just on a terrible team or a terribly managed team, and we just don't know. So we have to put him at 4 because the 3 quarterbacks ahead of him have proven that they've earned their spots of where they are. And
they can do something. We don't know what Joe Burrow can do.
We just don't know what he does. So that's why he's at 4. And
I'm excited to see him.
I think if he has some success, maybe in that 3-game stretch that I have them going in the later part of the season, I think he can move up to number 3. I don't think he'll move up to 2 or 1 unless he has an MVP season. I just don't see that happening.
I think the most likely change to this ranking is that Big Ben is washed up and drops to 4.
Yeah.
And everybody else bumps up 1. Except Lamar. He will stay at
with 1. Pittsburgh not wanting to let Big Ben go.
Yeah. So, I mean, that would be my thought process on here. So
we move into possibly the most hostile territory of the day today.
Wide receivers. We
went back and forth, both of us.
I'm glad you moved around.
I moved around like 2 or 3 times just because the wide receiving course for these teams are, I don't know how I would say this.
They're interesting.
Yeah.
There's, Cleveland, who has 2 veteran proven receivers that have some health concerns. Pittsburgh has a lot of question marks about it. Baltimore seems to have a lack of, I don't want to say talent, but a lack thereof of weapons. That's not really what they're trying to do, but they have some players that are really fun to watch. And Cincinnati has really good player in Tyler Boyd, a giant question mark in A.J. Green, and Auden Tate's an interesting player. So, I mean, I'd say interesting is the word to use here because they all seem to have some big pros, but some big cons.
Yeah, and just a clarification, all of these positions are based off everyone's healthy all the time. So
with some rare exceptions to me. It's like AJ Green is the golden standard here for what does it look like to me for a player that I'm not going to quite peg in perfectly because now it's become a problem repeatedly. James Conner's another player that I have that problem with. I don't want to call them injury prone. I love both these players, but they're not. They have shown to me that it is not out outside of the norm that they don't finish a season.
Yeah,
I don't want to say that one's better or one's worse because of the injury, but it's hard for me, in particular with AJ Green, it's hard for me to say, well, he'll be back and healthy because when was the last time he played a full season healthy? I mean, I remember when I started playing fantasy football in 2014, 2015, I had AJ Green. I loved him. He missed like 4 games with turf toe. I didn't know what turf toe was until I had AJ Green in fantasy, and now I know what turf toe is. So, I mean, that's where it comes into injury for me. But you're right. I don't plan like Odell to miss games. Like I'm saying, okay, sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. But to me, if he has another season where he's getting these injuries frequently, then I'm going to say, you know what, maybe Odell is a problem.
Yeah. But I don't know. I think getting into the rankings here, we differ on number 1 because...
We differ on number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Look at that.
Yeah. Well, I will start off with my number 1, and I'll give my reasoning for it. Cincinnati I have as my number 1 wide receiving core. I think they are the deepest core in the division that has shown good play. The Cincinnati Bengals don't have a lot going for them otherwise except for Joe Burrow and Joe Mixon. But their wide receiving core is pretty deep. If we're talking AJ Green plays the entire season, I think it's a totally different season for Joe Burrow. I'm factoring it in.
That'd be great to see.
It would be great to see. I'm factoring in that he will be playing this entire season. However unlikely it is. However, if he goes down, who is his backup? John Ross III. John Ross III got 500 yards last year. That's respectable on a Cincinnati Bengals team.
He had like 3 games with all of those yards in it.
Yards are yards. And AJ Green having a backup in John Ross or Auden Tate, who Auden Tate has come in the last 2 seasons and put up some great relief numbers. Then we move on to Tyler. Then we move on to Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, we talk about the main meat here. Tyler Boyd.
The main man on the Cincinnati Bengals wide receiving core that has been there for the past 2 seasons and really put in work is Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd over 1,000 yards last season with 5 touchdowns and almost 100 receptions. So that in itself is impressive for a rookie quarterback Joe Burrow to inherit. And then he goes on and inherits one of the best wide receivers to come out of the draft in T. Higgins. T. Higgins put on a show last year with Sunshine Trevor Lawrence. And this man knows how to go for the deep balls as well as the slot. And he is a lethal weapon. So as a unit, I feel as if the Cincinnati Bengals have one of the more secure wide receiving cores. And that's why I put them number 1.
All right, so if we add John Ross's around 500 yards, Cincinnati's top 3 receivers still put up 2,100 yards roughly.
Okay.
Cleveland put up 2,200 with 2 receivers. I would rather have 2 amazing receivers who are both 1,000-yard receivers over 3 or 4 receivers who one is 1,000-yard, one we have no idea if he's playing, one is a rookie, so we don't know what T. Higgins will do, and the other 2 are Auden Tate and John Ross. I'm not going to put my faith in Auden Tate and John Ross. I'm going to put my faith in Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry. So Jarvis Landry, the big concern is he's coming off the hip injury that he played through a bit at the end. He played at the Pro Bowl a bit with it, and he had surgery, so he'll probably miss a few of the starting weeks. That being said, who else is getting thrown to? Is Odell Beckham Jr., one of the best receivers we've seen. Now, don't get it confused because he played with Eli Manning. So Odell Beckham is the main receiver here. Jarvis Landry is nothing but consistency.
Agreed. 96 of
96 playable games.
Yeah.
He has played 96. So when I look at this receiving core, I say Cleveland, you have 2 elite receivers here. Okay. Now, the big question mark with them is injuries.
Yep.
Odell Beckham has a history of coming out of games temporarily or maybe not playing games because of injuries. That being said, when he's on the field, even when he's injured on the field, he is still better than Tyler Boyd is. Jarvis Landry has been nothing but consistency his whole career. Like we said, he's played 96 of 96 playable games. He will miss the first couple games of this season because of his hip surgery. That is a fact. He will. Unless he is a freak of nature, CMC, or not CMC, Cooper Kupp, he's going to miss some games. When he comes back, he's going to be nothing but consistent. So I will take 2 great to elite wide receivers over an injured receiver in AJ Green, a rookie in Tyler Higbee, a good to great receiver in Tyler Boyd, and then whatever John Ross and Auden Tate are.
Well, Tyler Boyd had more yards, more touchdowns, and more catches than Odell Beckham did last year.
He had 11 more yards, 7 more receptions, and 1 more touchdown. And he was the only wide receiver on that team, I'll add. Jarvis Landry was an option. Not to mention Kareem
Baker
Hunt
Mayfield was the quarterback throwing to Odell, and who was throwing to Tyler Boyd?
Andy Dalton. But it doesn't matter if you're the only receiving
I
option.
want that on record as he acknowledged that Andy Dalton and AJ McCarron were throwing the ones to Tyler Boyd.
I'm not going to
and
not
Baker
acknowledge
Mayfield
that.
was throwing to Odell Beckham Jr.
It could be Nathan Peterman throwing. If it's the only
Listen,
receiving
Nathan Peterman
option,
is the best quarterback of all time, but we don't need to speak about him in the sense of the team that he doesn't even play for.
It won't matter. If you're the only option on the field to be thrown to, you're the only option to be thrown to. You're going to get thrown to. There's no way he's getting 90 receptions again. I'd take 20 of these off from Tyler Boyd.
I want you to look, though, at the depth chart behind Odell Beckham.
I acknowledge
behind
that.
Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins is their wide receiver 3. Do you know who Rashard Higgins is?
Yeah, he's Rashard Higgins.
He's Rashard Higgins with a whole bunch of 55 yards last year.
I acknowledge
Then they go out and draft a wide receiver who I think is a very, very talented wide receiver, as a man that I've watched a lot in the Big Ten. Jonathan People-Jones from Michigan put up huge numbers at Michigan.
I'm not going to count
big
rookies here,
players
outside of the top couple rookie receivers.
That's what I'm saying.
Drafted.
You have two wide receivers compared to 5.
Hold on. Would you rather have 2 elite wide receivers or 5 with 1 great and you don't know with what the rest? I know what John... I'm not going to say that AJ Green's going to play games. He was supposed to play last year. Guess what he didn't do? He was supposed to play a full set the season before. Guess what he didn't do? Guess what he doesn't do? Play full seasons.
I think that
takes
3
a
wide
toll
receivers
on
that'll
you.
get you 500 yards can be more effective than 1 wide receiver getting you 1,000.
There are 3 receivers, 1 getting 1,000, 2 getting 500 something. Didn't get as many as the 2 receivers on Cleveland, both getting 1,000.
I think that's the same argument you had. I think there's the same argument you had.
Yeah,
because
for the LA Rams.
Who else was being thrown to on the Cleveland Browns?
Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. Njoku. Yeah, like this team. Hold on, what is this?
Who else did they throw to on that team? Like exactly.
I just told you
answered
the
my
3
point.
other people.
Njoku, who couldn't catch to save his freaking life. This man's
turns out Njoku's not as good as we all thought he'd be.
This man's hands are as hard as stone, and now he wants a trade because he got a whole 5 receptions and 41 yards last season.
No, look, I'm not arguing about the depth here. There is more people on depth that Cincinnati has.
That's why I do it.
But
I'm
looking here at depth versus talent. Hold on, this is my last argument for Cleveland. What does Cleveland want to do before they throw the ball? They want to run the ball. This is not a throw first team. This is not where like Cincinnati is going to have to throw the ball.
They don't have to throw the ball with Joe Mixon.
They're going to have to throw the ball because they're not going to be ahead in games like Cleveland can be. I'm telling you right now, I love Tyler Boyd. I love him. I had him on fantasy for a little bit 2 years ago. Didn't get him last year. I tried. But I'm going to take this is the same argument we had about the Rams. I will take the 2 elite players that I know will get me production.
You calling Robert Woods elite is high. You are high out of your mind calling Robert Woods elite.
Robert Woods doesn't drop balls.
Robert Woods is not anywhere close to Jarvis Landry or Odell Beckham
Robert Woods
Jr.
is in the same caliber as player as Jarvis Landry. Absolute same. They both catch the ball every time you throw it at them.
I want you to comment. I want you to place down in the comments your thoughts on if you think Robert Woods is as good as Odell Beckham Jr.
Right here, Robert Woods, 1134, 2 touchdowns, 90 receptions. Jarvis Landry, 1174, 74, and 6. So the only difference here is touchdowns, and Jarvis Landry had 40 more yards on 16 less receptions. Same caliber of player. Robert Woods has never caught touchdowns though. That's never been a thing for Robert Woods.
Is not even on the same caliber as Jarvis Landry.
I disagree completely.
Well, moving on to our third spot.
Never mind. It's not worth it.
Moving on to our third spot because this is going to take forever today if we let ourselves.
Well, this is the one that we heavily disagree on. Everything else we're fairly in sync with outside of offensive line, which you're nitpicking there, because not you in particular, but both of us there. We're kind of nitpicking at what does it look like.
What we like and what we don't like on those offensive. Yeah, but getting back to the wide receivers. So I have Cincy 1, you have Cleveland 1, and then you have Cincy 2,
I do.
And I have
do
Cleveland
like
too.
Cincinnati
So
more than these other
we
ones.
have very close opinions on those two teams.
And I'll tell you right now why I have Cincinnati too, because I think Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and Baltimore all kind of feel the similar unit in terms of receiving, where there's kind of like this one clear one, and then kind of this mismatch of underneath. You know, Willie Snead, Auden Tate, Deontay Johnson. That kind of like are these players really? They're not ones. They're a mismatch of 2s and 3s.
Yeah, I would say more 3s than 2s, but it's
Willie Snead out here, man. No, you are correct. But so I have to say, yeah, and then we differ again at 3 and 4, where we have them flipped.
So at 3, I had Baltimore because I love the opportunities that these wide receivers are getting. Marquise Hollywood Brown, what a showstopper! This man is, if not the number 1 wide receiver for if he's not the number 1 pick for Lamar Jackson on the field.
It's not. It's Mark Andrews. But we're not talking about tight ends. We're talking about wide receivers.
As a wide receiver, if he's not the number 1, if he's not the number 1 pick for Lamar Jackson, who's the MVP of the entire league, I don't know who would be.
He's the top receiver, and he was dealing with injuries.
More elite wide receiver. He's dealing with that injury that was hankering him all last season. But Willie Snead as a second is not bad. Willie Snead still can put up yards. He didn't really reach 500 last year. He still got 5 touchdowns, so not bad. He's an effective red zone player. I don't think he's as effective as Marquise Brown. Miles Boykin was their 3rd last year. Really didn't do a lot. Caught a couple touchdowns. That's it. We do, when we move into the tight ends, that's where we really get a lot of.
You find Mark Andrews.
That's where we find a lot of chunk yards where that went. That wasn't running.
Yeah. So
I get it. I just think that based on who is throwing them the ball, which I'm judging judging off of, getting the ball thrown to you by Lamar Jackson this year, I feel is a better, safer bet than getting the ball thrown to you by Big Ben.
So I'll tell you this right now. I like Baltimore's receiving core more than I do Pittsburgh. I think that there's a lot of question marks on Pittsburgh. But I am not going to tell you that their leading 2 wide receivers, which was Willie Snead and Marquise Brown, neither one of them broke 600 yards receiving. They put up 932 yards, 12 touchdowns, which is insanity. I mean, I love Marquise Brown. He's coming. He's going to be healthier this year. He should be from the Jones fracture, I believe it is. But I look at Pittsburgh and I say James Washington, Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, and the addition of Chase Claypool. Now I'll say one of my favorite picks in the draft at wide receiver was Devin Duvernay, Duvernay. I always mess up his last name if I'm not saying it correctly.
Yeah, I think it's Duvernay.
From Texas to Baltimore. I love that slot option for them. I think that they're missing that distinctly, that underneath kind of route from a wide receiver. But I'm not going to use a rookie outside of, like I said, Judy, Ruggs, and CeeDee, who were these elite level vying for first wide receiver pick. I think you need to give
T. Higgins that respect as well.
I will not. He was taken in the 2nd for a reason. There was a reason Jalen Reagor and Jefferson got taken ahead of him.
I want you to know he was the first pick in the 2nd round.
He was. I like T. Higgins coming out of college, but I'm going to tell you right now, I have Pittsburgh ahead because I think I know more of what Pittsburgh's going to look like receiving-wise. Now here's my question mark with this. What is Juju?
What is Juju? That is a good point.
Like I said, I like Baltimore's more because I think I have a better understanding of what Marquise Brown is than what I do with Juju. Who doesn't love Juju as a person? He's other than Antonio Brown. But I mean, you know what? I want to move him, but I'm not gonna, because I'm gonna stand by that. I think that this Pittsburgh receiving core that put almost 2,000 yards between their top 3 receivers, 2 of whom were Deontay Johnson and James Washington, who basically traded spots partway through the season. So, I mean, I just saw better production out of these receivers than I did out of Baltimore. And I know that Pittsburgh is a team that values its wide receivers, so they're going to put more time into it. And I just think that they field an overall better group. This isn't like my opinion with Cleveland and Cincinnati, where I think Cincinnati's fielding more people, but Cleveland's fielding more elite. These talents aren't that far off, in my opinion. But I then look at, okay, so they're similar. Who's then that third option?
Yeah.
Looking at this, it's Deontay Johnson, who put up better numbers outside of touchdowns, and he nearly caught up to Marquise Brown in touchdowns. He was 2 away, and he wasn't the number 1 wide receiver. So that's what puts Pittsburgh ahead of Baltimore. Now, at the end of next season, if you told me Baltimore was a better receiving core than them, wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if Baltimore actually moved to 2 in this.
But with Baltimore's receiving core, you also have to factor in their tight ends, and we can't do that in this.
If you're talking about total receiving core, Baltimore comes to 2.
Yeah.
Because Mark Andrews is a phenomenally growing talent, but we're separating this as just wide receivers. We're talking about tight ends. Mark Andrews is phenomenal. Him and Lamar have a connection that is Zach Ertz, Wentz, that is Gronk, Brady. Like they connect to each other.
Yeah. So I mean, we differ on every spot here. I have it ranked Cincinnati, Cleveland, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, first to last for wide receivers.
I'll say I have it Cleveland, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Baltimore.
I think we're all like getting to the same point here with these wide receivers. Is what are you going to show me this season? I think there's a lot of what ifs, especially in the wide receiving cores this year. Huge what ifs on Cincinnati's, especially for me. I have them ranked number 1, but I think Cleveland their wide receiving core has a lot to show. If they can put out great numbers like they did last season, and Baker finally gets off that slump, and then Nick Chubb is a good pass catching back in the out of the backfield. I think the receptions, I would say in general on the Cleveland Browns could be very good.
I mean, if we want to include outside positions, though, to the receiving here, Cleveland's fielding Kareem Hunt, who is one of the best pass-catching backs.
Yeah. Well, let's move that on to our great segue of running backs.
Well, we agree here completely.
It's not that hard to agree that
Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt
are the best running back core.
It's arguable that that's the best running back tandem in the league, in my opinion.
Okay.
You're fielding 2 potential, like, Nick Chubb finished 2nd in yards last year. He was phenomenal. Kareem Hunt, over that second half 8 games that he got back on, looked phenomenal. We saw Kareem Hunt get a full workload in Kansas City before the incident with him. He was phenomenal. Like, you're fielding 2 amazing talents here.
I think Nick Chubb is one of the most underrated talents in the entire league that nobody, or I wouldn't say maybe he's underrated. I would say least talked about talents.
People like him. I don't think people realize how good he is.
Exactly. This man is a dynamic player, and if you watch what he does,
he is light years better than Miles Sanders. Yeah. And if you look at how they're talked about in like the same group.
Yeah.
Nick Chubb
lights up the AFC North
of the gate to get into that top. I think Nick Chubb is probably like the 6th. But like, if you're not Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Zeke, Saquon, or CMC, you're not better than Chubb to me.
I think Chubb's actually in top five easily.
I think
he's better than Dalvin Cook. I think he's a much more effective weapon for his team. I think he's a much more effective weapon for his team. That's why.
He doesn't catch the same way that Cook does. He doesn't catch, and he's not as elusive at breaking away.
I disagree.
You can pull up his stats. I'm telling you, he doesn't catch the ball the same way that Cook does. I'm not afraid of Nick Chubb past like the 5-yard line for catching. I'm afraid of Dalvin Cook. I love Nick Chubb. You will not get me to say that Nick Chubb is better than Dalvin Cook.
Yeah.
I think 36 for 278 and 0 touchdowns.
I think that's pretty good for a running back.
It's not bad. No, it's not bad. I'm not saying he's not a good pass catcher.
Yeah.
He's just not as good as Dalvin Cook to me. But we're pulling teeth here.
We are pulling teeth. This is all comparing to other teams in the league, not even in the division. So
I mean,
overall, number 1, Cleveland Browns, not even a speck on the radar.
This is where I think people might get mad.
I think so. We both agree that the second running back core.
So, okay, hold on, I'm going to say this real quick. I love Joe Mixon. How do you feel about Joe Mixon?
I love Joe Mixon because I love Joe Mixon for a selfish way of he's always helped me in fantasy. And
I love President. I love Joe Mixon. You know what I don't love is that Joe Mixon's it. You know what I do love is that Baltimore is fielding a multitude. J.K. Dobbins, who's a rookie coming in, is lighting people. Like, he is being loved. I'm not going to say he's better. But Mark Ingram has had a much more successful career. Mark Ingram is talented. Justice Hill and Gus Edwards are both nice relief runners. And, I mean, I feel like this is going to maybe be odd. But I'm not going to talk about Baltimore's running backs and not talk about their quarterback. Who basically services as a running back at times for them. Like, I will not do this for almost any other team.
Yeah.
But, this running back group is phenomenal. I think Mark Ingram, people have slept on him because of how unsexy he is.
Yes, exactly.
It's like if Frank Gore was kind of better at running the ball, Mark Ingram is what I feel like Frank Gore would be.
Yes. A little more flashy than Frank Gore.
Frank Gore is one of my favorite players of all time because he just doesn't stop playing. He just exists. Like I'm pretty sure at the beginning of the universe, God met Frank Gore and was like, "What's up?" Frank Gore was like, "Sup, running this football."
Frank Gore is the epitome of you keep those knees high and you're gonna be in the league for a while.
He said he tries to run like LT.
Yeah,
which I think is hilarious because
he's not the same body shape as LT.
yeah, bowling ball, but so we do agree that Baltimore at 2. That Baltimore they feel it's that group. It's the shotgun group. Fire versus the sniper shot.
Yes, because it'll either be Mark Ingram coming out of the backfield or Lamar swinging around for that like bootleg and then possibly taking off from that bootleg, and then to add J.K. Dobbins, who I think is one of the most underrated running backs out of this entire draft, and for him to fall that far.
I was stunned.
I was stunned too. Into a team like to Baltimore at 55.
I was almost
in the second
as stunned
round.
As at 17 when Cowboys drafted CeeDee Lamb.
I was. I think CeeDee Lamb deserves to be at that spot, but I think J.K. Dobbins falling to 55 is an absolute travesty for the entire league, except for Baltimore. It just seems as if Baltimore went out and said, "You know what we're gonna do? We're going to go against the entire grain of the NFL, and we're going to get better than what we were last year."
Which is horrifying. I'll say this, that I think Joe Mixon, we both have Cincinnati at 3. I think Joe Mixon is as talented or more talented than anybody in this running back group.
Yes,
but I look
absolutely.
At Gus Edwards was once the lead back here. He's now their backup. He is a great backup. Mark Ingram, great at leading this field. Now, how long does Mark Ingram have left? I don't know. I think we're kind of at the end of his shelf life here.
Yeah.
I
think he had some rough years.
Justice Hill coming out of school. I don't think Justice Hill got a ton of work last year, just how the team pulled it up. I think Justice Hill has room to improve. So I think that's what it comes down to, is that just Gus Edwards and Mark Ingram together are a more efficient backfield than what Joe Mixon will be by himself. And I love Joe Mixon. I think Joe Mixon is phenomenally talented. He's a top 10 running back in my opinion.
Yeah.
But he's not good enough to beat
the
duo in the group.
What I won't do is say to draft a running back in your fantasy from Baltimore. I just don't think it's worth it unless you want to have a good
if we're talking about fantasy,
player.
If you want to take a shot on Dobbins or Mark Ingram, I think you can, but you just have to acknowledge that you need to make sure that you have safe players in the rest of your spots.
Yeah.
That's
all I have to say about that. Don't commit on
Don't draft Lamar in the first 3 rounds. Just don't do it. Get yourself a Matt Ryan in like the 6th round, who will probably finish. Last year he didn't finish anywhere close, but
yeah, don't say Matt Ryan.
Well, Matt Ryan, I mean,
give yourself a Jared Goff. Okay?
This is a sign.
Just kidding. Do not get Jared Goff. I got him last year.
Everyone loves Hayden Hurst. Everyone loves Calvin Ridley for a breakout. Everyone loves Todd Gurley to do stuff. Everyone loves Julio Jones. They get the ball from somewhere, and you get the points for throwing the ball. So I don't understand why people are like Matt Ryan's going to be good for fantasy. That's our side note to fantasy. But then it finishes out with Pittsburgh here at 4.
I think it's no joke.
And this hurts my heart because I love James Conner.
I do too.
He has a sweetheart story, but I don't trust him to play 16 games anymore. Yeah. I trust him to give me about 10 games good, and not even that maybe. They
when he came in and
2
filled
draft
in
picks on running backs now 2 years in a row for a reason.
Yeah, when he came in and filled in for Le'Veon Bell when he took a seat that season, you couldn't help but be inspired. Season. You couldn't help but be inspired by James Conner's story.
He beat cancer, became an NFL running back, and has done a decent job. It just sucks that the one thing that you can't control, which is injuries, is clogging him up.
Yeah, and I
hate it.
And I think you're right in the fact that this year will be a proving year for James Conner, in the fact that if he stays healthy, and if he somehow miraculously, as a Steelers running back, makes all 16 games, I think
he won't.
He will
That's
be
the worst part.
I think he'll be possibly the 3rd best running back in this division. But
I bet you he'll give you 10 good games to what happened here, and then he won't play 4.
All right.
And that's my best stat I can see for him. He's not playing 16. He's not. I hate it to say it, and I hate to be this person to feel like this, but
I have faith. I have faith in you, James Conner.
I love James Conner. I would love for him to just pull an AP after that ACL tear and just be like, you know what? My bones are adamantium now. Let's go. And he got yoked in this offseason. I love him. I want him to succeed. I want him to play 16 games. I want him to say, you know what, cancer, you can't stop me. Because that's a great story, and that's a great person.
Yeah.
So that rounds out running back. So Cleveland, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh.
We all agree.
Easy peasy lemon squeeze there. Tight ends, not that hard here. I gotta say, outside of one tight end here, I really. So we'll get to Cleveland, but number one we have Baltimore Ravens with
Obviously.
Mark Andrews.
Mark Andrews
He's better
and
than
Nick Boyle.
Njoku. He's better than Eric Ebron. He's better than Vance McDonald. He's better than C.J. Uzomah. I think he's better than Austin Hooper.
I think they're the only team that actually has a tight end core. I think every other team, it just has one tight end that is efficient for them.
Yeah,
But
so
I think
it's easy to say
Baltimore Ravens actively use their tight ends as part of their dynamic offense.
Yeah, so I want to move into Cleveland here really badly because I am not an Austin Hooper believer. I think that what happened last year was Calvin really went down and Austin Hooper was open a lot and Austin Hooper just didn't drop a ball. This is not the same thing. He's not coming into a team that is this heavy pass kind of like I just don't see him being that good. I think that he won the day because he got his money, but like I am not a huge believer for Austin Hooper. I think that last year was a year where he kind of got it lucky. I think that there's kind of one or two every year that do it, and he was one of them. And I don't believe it. I don't think Njoku's all that good.
Yeah,
you can point at his
But I'm
stats
saying,
right
like,
there. They're not that sexy.
they're not sexy stats.
He is a tight end.
He is a tight end, so like 787 for a tight end, not too bad. I mean, it's 42nd overall in the entire league.
Last year, pass catching was in a weird rut because only 3 wide receivers hit double-digit touchdowns. That's not, I was listening to a fantasy football show, and it talked about Kenny Golladay. It was the fantasy footballers, if I'm correct. Which, oh my God, what a hidden show! But they were talking about Kenny Golladay would have been like the 12th wide receiver in fantasy last year, had it been the year before. So I mean, it tells you like last year was an odd year. But I to kind of rebound it here, we got a little sidetrack there. I'm not that big into Austin Hooper. This is a run-first team. I don't really feel like... I could be completely wrong, but I remember when I watched Atlanta play, I didn't really feel like he was picking up blocks the same way that I think that they'll want and need. And I think that, as tight ends go, I think that having Vance McDonald and Eric Ebron, I'd almost rather do it because it's cheaper and I don't feel as needed to have this big name. I have them at 2. Because I think he is better than Vance McDonald and Ebron and Uzomah, whose name I just cannot say. Uzomah. But I don't really like any of these 3 tight end groups. And honestly, if I'm looking at it, I'd almost rather have Pittsburgh. But
Well,
I'm not an Austin Hooper believer. He seems like a nice guy. Maybe he's better. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and I'm fine with that. You got to take your stances. You can't just, there. And I'm choosing to believe that I think Austin Hooper will look much more like a Eric Ebron. Like the year that he had Andrew Luck to the next year. He won't be bad, but he's not going to be good.
Yeah, I think the only reason that he's at number 2 is because of 3 and 4.
No, I'd agree.
I agree that he had a good season last year, but I do agree that it was because of pretty inflated stats with Ridley going down. I think he's a good tight end. I think he's a better tight end than Njoku, because Njoku has nothing but stone hands.
That's not much harder to be for me.
But Pittsburgh Steelers, Eric Ebron is old, and he'll get you touchdowns in the red zone. I'll give you that. But then Vance McDonald, I've had Vance McDonald. I've been
fantasy hate.
I've had Vance McDonald on fantasy the past couple of years, and he'll get you some good games where he'll get you like 50 to 100 yards maybe. But he is never going to be a reliable tight end for you. And I think I think he's less reliable than Austin Hooper, and that's why Austin Hooper's at 2. And then if you look at Cincy, I think Austin Hooper's more reliable than C.J. Uzomah. And that's the reason that those 2 teams are below them. I think that the only reason Pittsburgh's above Cincinnati is because they have 2 experienced tight ends that can go out and get the ball. Even though Uzomah has shown himself to me as a good tight end, I think him just by himself in Cincinnati is not going to provide as much as those 2 in Pittsburgh would.
I think that Austin Hooper had that Vance McDonald season that he had in San Francisco a few years ago, where he just kind of had this huge season. I think that Austin Hooper will probably regress a lot, and I agree with you completely that the reason that they're at 2 is just because there's not a ton of talent here. This has been a weird thing because tight ends feel like they're almost being slowly phased out of the NFL to a degree.
Yes and no. Like they'll get that they'll get that resurgence every few years with like
Well,
Zach
there'll always
Ertz.
be a couple elite tight ends just because you get the big body receivers, but it just feels to me like as the game wanting to move to speed, tight ends aren't speed,
Yeah.
and so you'll of course have teams like New England, which says we're gonna go do our own thing, or you'll have teams like Indianapolis that just feel like they want to slow down the game and stuff like that. But I mean, yeah, like I said, we agree on here completely. I think
Yeah.
that I agree pretty much wholly with your sentiment. All right, so we'll move to O-lines here, which is the only other one we actually disagree on at all.
Yeah.
So I have Pittsburgh at 1, Baltimore at 2, and then Cleveland and Cincinnati finished 3 and 4. Cincinnati's just kind of had a terrible O-line. The Browns fielded a kind of bad one last year, which is why I think we both agree that they kind of finish out the bottom a little bit. You have Cleveland above Pittsburgh.
I do, yeah.
I think that Pittsburgh last year was a kind of dysfunctional offense. I don't think that the O-line was bad. When I watched Pittsburgh, the O-line looked just as good as it ever had.
You know what it didn't look good in, though? That Browns game, defending that quarterback.
You're true, but Myles Garrett is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that O-line can't block from. It's helmets.
So I have Pittsburgh at 1. I know what they're bringing. DeCastro, I think, is the best player on this offensive line. I think he's one of the best O-linemen in the league in general, probably top 3. Maybe the best. Although I don't feel like that's fair to say. I feel like he's kind of slowed down a little bit. But I have faith in this unit as the offense probably gets a little more competent this year to be a lot better. Baltimore looks good, although they lost Ngata, which is a huge loss to them. But I still think it's better than what Cleveland or Cincinnati is fielding.
I feel I went off the rankings from last year based off their run and pass blocking. So, according to Football Outsiders, the Pittsburgh
They're outsiders. They don't know what they're talking about.
Right. I think the reason I don't have Pittsburgh at number 1 is because out of the 4 teams in this division, Pittsburgh finished last in running blocking, and they finished second in pass blocking, but they really needed that run blocking last year, and they just could not have it. I didn't see that they improved at all with any new additions. I think with DeCastro and Pouncey back there, those two make a solid unit on that group, but the rest just seem to kind of flounder when in big games. And then that's why I have Baltimore number 1. According to Football Outsiders, they were number 1 in running offensive line, and then they were number 1 in passing offensive line. So I really don't see how any of these teams could beat them. I would say beat them in the sense of O-line. They're the dynamic quarterback that they have to block for and the running backs that they have to block for easily make them the best offensive line in this division.
I think Baltimore's 2, but let me ask this. Did Pittsburgh lose their best offensive lineman that had been there for a long time, was a veteran presence, was one of the elite linemen in the NFL? So I have Baltimore at 2, but Marshall Yonda's retirement from this offensive line is huge. Pittsburgh didn't lose anybody, and their offense is not going to be to the same caliber as last year because it literally couldn't be worse. I don't know how it gets worse unless Big Ben is just like dead on the field, like in their Weekend at Bernie's or whatever.
Weekend at Bernie's?
Yeah, just Weekend at Bernie's with like puppet strings,
holding up Big Ben?
Yeah, and I don't think so. I mean, I look here and you put Cleveland at 2, which is a huge thing to me because they had one of the worst offensive lines last year. They had to spend a top draft capital. I think it'll be better this year. I think it'll be a middle of the pack offensive line, but I know what I'm getting. This is what it comes down to, I think, is I know what I'm getting with Pittsburgh. I believe in that line. I think like Dallas and like Philadelphia, it's getting a little older, but I know what I'm getting, and I trust and I believe in it. And if I'm Big Ben, I feel safe behind Pouncey and DeCastro, and the other 3 are still middle of the pack or better offensive linemen. And to me, that's why they're 1 to me. I have Baltimore at 2, like I said. I think they're a good line. I think Yonda's loss is huge. I think earlier I said Ngata. That was the defensive lineman they had. So I apologize for that little mix-up. And then Cincinnati, we both have as the worst one. And then I have Cleveland at 3, you have Cleveland at 2.
I think with Baltimore and Cleveland, I just kind of...
I think you hate Pittsburgh.
It's not that I hate Pittsburgh. I
think
respect
you hate
Pittsburgh. I
Pittsburgh.
respect Pittsburgh a lot, actually. I think they were
You're just mad
really
because you
good
beat
team.
them in the Super Bowl.
Why would I be mad that I beat them in the Super Bowl?
You're mad you wanted to lose to them.
Listen, I'm not the Seattle Seahawks here.
Because of you,
I don't.
New England is now tied for most Super Bowl
I don't lose
wins.
to good AFC teams in the
You
Super
just
Bowl.
don't make it to the Super Bowl. You dog shit. I'm gonna dog it back. You're not
many
even at me.
How many times has the Cowboys lost the Super Bowl?
I don't know, what, 3?
Packers only lost it once.
You guys have only been 5 times.
4-1, baby. 4-1.
We're 5-3.
Do you know how much we lost by the last game? 4 points.
We've made it to 8.
It was
you made it to
Joe
5.
Elway, and you know that thing where he like spins on the goal line. Oh wait, that's against us in the Super Bowl. That's him.
That really cool play.
That really fucking cool play. Oh fuck, that's us.
So to regroup here, O-line rankings. I have Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Cleveland, Cincinnati. You field Baltimore, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati.
Yeah.
These are all. I feel like
these are super subject to change.
Yeah, it's what you feel. I think offensive line is hardest year to year to a degree.
Because there's so many moving pieces in and out on an offensive line.
Well, just how your offense looks changes year to year. So like, do Baltimore takes regression this year on offense? Probably. So maybe Lamar doesn't run as much. Maybe Lamar throws it then.
Yeah.
You know, maybe now that the offensive line in Cleveland is better, Baker Mayfield throws for 5,000 yards.
And they'll continue to be
50
ranked
touchdowns.
number 1.
And like,
I get it, yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's Patrick Mahomes and Baker Mayfield fighting for who gets the most yards. Like, we don't know, what happens with everything. So we're moving on now to defensive line. Now, we agree completely on this. I'm tempted to have put Baltimore at 1 here. I've made it no secret, as we've talked about, my love for Calais Campbell, Derek Wolfe edition. My problem was who they had before.
Yes.
It was all right, but Cleveland, Myles Garrett is the best pass rusher right now in this division.
I would agree, yes.
He just got the huge extension, which I personally am surprised at, given what happened with Mason Rudolph. I will go on record saying that I think if Mason Rudolph had been a more talented quarterback, Myles Garrett would have received bigger punishment. Myles Garrett is phenomenally talented. Other than that one red mark on his career, he's been one of the best pass rushers. It's just gone under the radar because this team hasn't been good.
Yeah. Consistently, as a number 1 pick overall,
he has not been a bust. He's been a success.
Not been a bust. Yeah.
No, and they say what, a third bust, a third succeed, and a third or neutral or whatever.
Yeah, he's definitely a succeed.
He's been a success. He, to me, is what people thought Jadeveon Clowney would be.
Yeah, a more solid defensive end.
He's been steady and he's been great.
Yeah.
And that's all you can ask for of a player.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then you add the likes of Ogunjobi on that line.
Yeah, it's a fun offensive line. It's a fun defensive unit here. I think that these guys are gonna have a lot more fun this year.
Sheldon Richardson as well.
Yeah. I have issues with Sheldon Richardson. I have some questions about his career, but he's shown talent at times, and we'll figure out what the hell happens. This is a unit though at 1, but let's get to 2, which is Baltimore, with the off-season additions of Derek Wolfe and Calais Campbell. Now they're both a little older.
Yes.
But who the hell cares? Because they're both phenomenal fucking players.
They're still like near the top or at the top of their game.
There is no better run stuffer than Calais Campbell in the NFL currently. Even
Aaron Donald.
Not a better run stuffer. He's a better overall pass rusher, not a better run stuffer. Calais Campbell is ginormous. He is fast, and he is the friendliest man. I've not met him, but every interview I see, he's one of the nicest people. Even in Jacksonville, when everything was just burning, he was just the dog with the Cubs. Everything's fine. That's all he was. He was still productive last year with that team burning around.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of more of a ball of flame just crashing into the ground than what happened with Jacksonville here. He was still out there being productive. They got him for a 5th round. Baltimore won the offseason. People love the trades that Arizona had. 5th round pick for Les Campbell. Signed Derek Wolfe. You suddenly have an elite defensive line. You have Patrick Queen in the draft at linebacker. Potential elite linebacker. And great DBs. This defense is phenomenal. It's the 2nd best. And it could be the 1st best next year by the end of it.
Absolutely. Yeah,
if you told me that Calais Campbell and Derek Wolfe together had the most sacks in the NFL, wouldn't be surprised.
Wouldn't be surprised. And their run defense is number 1 in the NFL. Wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, congrats. The one problem you had on defense, the main problem you had with your team, you went and signed the best person to fix it.
Best 2 people.
Derek Wolfe on the edge and Calais Campbell in the center. Beautiful.
Again, it's no real bother who's 1 and 2. And then we agree on 3 and 4. It's just kind of hard.
I think that Pittsburgh is right here, right behind Baltimore.
I don't think they're on the same level. I think they have really good defense with some really good players.
Hayward is
but they're
phenomenal.
I don't think they're a unit.
I think that Pittsburgh fields the best defense in this division. Because
I
at
don't
all
think so.
three layers, it is lethal. I don't know what to expect out of Patrick Queen, although I have an idea of what to expect. Honestly, this division can be characterized as Cincinnati is nowhere close to the defense that these other three are fielding. Cincinnati is last in all three defensive categories. I'm sorry, they have a nice safety, and that's
good for them.
that's about it. But so for defensive line, we agree completely. Cleveland, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati. I'm of the belief that these top three are all fairly close to one another.
Yeah.
We get to linebacker.
I think Pittsburgh, though, has the second best defensive player in the entire division, and that's T.J. Watt.
I would argue that T.J. Watt might be the best defensive player.
I would put Myles Garrett there, but
I think T.J. Watt has been just as successful.
I think it's a close.
The same amount of credit, which is none. Neither one of these players are
exactly.
They do. T.J. Watt has arguably had a better start to his career than J.J. Watt has.
I think I totally agree.
And J.J. Watt, when he came on, J.J. Watt said T.J. Watt will be better than I am.
Yeah.
T.J. Watt, I'm furious because I was rewatching that draft recently. Yeah, we took Taco Charlton. Like 3 picks later, they take T.J. Watt. If Dallas had T.J. Watt,
I was hoping the Packers were just terrible enough that year, I believe, where I was like, they could get him.
Yeah,
and then
you know what?
And then they didn't.
Yeah, so we'll get into linebackers here, which
boom, we're right there. We're both in agreement.
Steelers
one
field the best linebackers.
And
it sucks. I'm blanking on his name. Who was with them that was nearly paralyzed?
Frazier, or
what was it?
Shazier.
Shazier was phenomenally he looked phenomenal. I don't know if he'll ever be back.
That man's walking and running again.
I know, but if anything, it's going to be another probably year or two before he's on the field again.
Well, I know that. I don't think he'll ever play in the NFL to the caliber he was, but
I don't think he'll play in the NFL.
Shout out to that
again,
man for never giving up.
Love Ryan Shazier. But
from the day he got hurt, he was never going to let that be him.
I think that Baltimore with Patrick Queen potentially is a great thing, but I don't think Cleveland, I don't think Cincinnati field great linebackers.
No.
I think Cleveland fields linebackers that get the job done. But I don't look at this any. I look at Baltimore and I look at the potential here of Patrick Queen and the group there. I like it.
I just love Bud Dupree on one side
and T.J. Watt
on the other.
It's not close here. This isn't close. That like Pittsburgh fields the best linebackers here.
Yeah.
This is arguably one. This is one of the best, if not the best, linebacking core in the NFL. It's elite. No matter what you
very much so elite.
Yeah. So I mean, like we said, we have Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Cleveland, Cincinnati.
And Baltimore could use some work on their linebackers. I think getting Patrick Queen in this draft was a huge win for them, getting from LSU.
Stunned that he was available there.
Yeah,
I was stunned. Too. I'm surprised that the Chargers didn't take him when they traded up.
Going on to DBs.
DBs. Oh, I wonder who is number one here. It could be actually Earl Thomas is an interesting conversation to have because maybe Earl Thomas with this offseason isn't as dominant
isn't as effective.
Marcus Peters is still there, and Marcus Peters is phenomenally talented.
Marcus Peters, I think, leaving the Rams was his best decision.
I still think that he has inconsistencies in his game. I think he thinks he's better than he is sometimes, but he's still a talented receiver. He makes.
I think Jalen Ramsey's the same way.
I think Jalen Ramsey is better than Marcus Peters.
Well, I think he is, but I'm saying he's in the same way that he thinks he's better than he is at that point.
Every corner thinks they're better than they are.
Darrelle Revis, yeah.
Darrelle Revis knew he was better than everyone else.
But he got beat. When he got beat, though.
Everyone gets beat. Like, every receiver doesn't have a good, it just happens. This is sports. LeBron James puts up 13 points against J.J. Barea in the finals. Shit happens.
Yeah, I just don't think it's...
Kids, real quick, if a kid is listening to this and you have a bad day, don't beat yourself up over it. We all have bad days. Make sure you don't do it again.
Yeah,
and that's your motivational quote.
Motivational quote from
Sammy. If you're 13 or 53, don't let it define you. Failure is not a definition.
It's just a stepping stone.
Unless you're like, I don't know, Blake Bortles or Mitch Trubisky, then maybe.
Blake Bortles making bank as backup quarterback. I wouldn't give that as No, don't count Blake Bortles in there with those kids. He's still a success.
Kids, backup quarterback, best job ever. You can play for like 25 years, and you'll make hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars.
Mark Brunell. Okay. Mark Brunell.
Look at Josh McCown.
Yeah.
Occasionally you might start for a team.
Matt Moore.
Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Look at that, dude. Sam Bradford.
Sam Bradford should have... I want to make like an individual video, like 2 minutes of me just talking about how much I love Sam Bradford and that he was one of the best quarterbacks who just didn't get to play.
Yeah. I agree.
Don't be made of glass, kids.
Don't be made of glass kids. Okay, moving on to
this
DBs.
is a close 1 and 2 for me.
It's a close 1 and 2 for you?
Yes.
Really?
I think Pittsburgh has a very talented one, although I think that it's not as at time. See, it's funny because I think both these teams have ups and downs, as backs do. But I think that Minkah Fitzpatrick led Pittsburgh group. I think it's that Earl Thomas and Marcus Peters as a duo is more to me than what Pittsburgh fields.
Yeah.
But Pittsburgh is a secure 2. And I think that they have the ability to challenge Baltimore for the 1 slot here. And in our rankings, at least. I don't want to make it sound like, it is what it is. But I think that Pittsburgh fields the most talented defense here. I think at all levels it has killers. I have questions with the Browns have questions about DBs and linebackers. With Baltimore, I have questions about Earl Thomas and the linebackers. With Cincinnati, I have nothing but questions.
Yeah.
But, Baltimore at 1, Pittsburgh at a strong 2.
I think I think it's a very good point to note it as a strong 2 and a close 2. So I think the unit overall, the 2 cornerbacks, Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters, and then Earl Thomas as a safety. I think that's as a core very strong, and it barely beats the core of Pittsburgh with Joe Hayden at cornerback, still chugging along 10 years later.
Love that
He
move.
made it out of Cleveland. I'm so proud of him. And then Minkah Fitzpatrick at free safety just
What a great move.
works.
Phenomenal.
What a great work. When I saw him get drafted to Miami, I was sad because I said that might be the end of his career. And then this man comes and balls out in Pittsburgh and shows that he is that talent that he came out of the draft. Everybody's saying he could have, and then they couldn't really show it in Miami.
If
and
Minkah
then
was
picks
still
it up.
on Miami, I think Miami would win like 3 more games than I have them winning. I think that they have
He's
a
a great player.
talented, they have a talented safety, and now Byron Jones, and like they have a talented back set. Minkah just didn't want to be there anymore. I don't blame him.
I don't blame him either.
And then Cleveland and Cincinnati at 3 and 4. Look, Cleveland has
Really only gave Cleveland the upper hand here because they have Ward.
Cincinnati has one good player on defense, and it's in the backfield, so that's where it be. I like Denzel Ward. He's shown flashes, I think, of becoming like a really great player.
Yeah.
Once he I think part of the problem with corners is they just got to find a way to kind of steady it out.
Well, they have a lot of young cornerbacks.
And that's another thing. Is like this could end up becoming a good unit.
Yeah, and they just drafted a free safety, so hopefully that'll help them with their deep ball problems that they were having last year. But I just think that they're just barely above what, like, Von Bell for the Bengals is really the only one I feel as if worth mentioning. Trey Waynes at cornerback is
Overrated.
Thank you. I've been wanting
He's
to say for a
a
long
middle
time.
of the pack. He's
When
a
he
good
went-
corner. He is not great, and he is being paid like he is a great corner. He's not.
There's a reason why he's not in Minnesota anymore.
There's a reason Minnesota, outside of Harrison Smith, couldn't stop receivers.
Because they like Xavier Rhodes.
Xavier Rhodes did. I don't know what happened to Xavier Rhodes. He went from a top corner to whatever he was last year. Trey Waynes is all right.
Last 2 years, actually, he's been terrible.
Last 2 years, whatever.
But, yeah.
I don't watch a ton of Minnesota.
Twice
I
a year
watch
at least.
NFC North at Thanksgiving and when the Cowboys aren't on, because I watch the Lions play because I have I have a lot of family in Detroit, so I have to watch the Lions play, and it is both fun and bad.
It's not a question here why Cleveland and Cincinnati are 3 and 4. It's just they're not up to par with the other two.
They could get there. I'll say that they could potentially get there in the backfield. I don't think their linebackers are anywhere catching up to this, but I think
Their
that their
DBs are
DBs
gonna have
have
to do a
the
lot of
chance
work.
to do it.
And then we move on to coach.
So this one actually is, I think it's interesting. I think it'll be between who is 1 and 2, because I think that everyone can acknowledge that Kevin Stefanski and Zach. So I'm going to start reverse if you're okay with that on this one. So we both have Zach Taylor at 4.
Yeah.
So a lot of people might say, well, Kevin Stefanski hasn't been a head coach. I saw nothing out of Zach Taylor I liked last year. I don't think Zach Taylor is that great of a head coach. I think they hired him because he comes from the McVay tree, and McVay tree is hot as hell right now. So I like what Kevin Stefanski did in Minnesota. I think that he was able to deal with Mike Zimmer's fetish of running the ball and only running the ball.
Yes.
Well,
because he wants to control the game with his defense.
Which your DB's got to be able to make stops with. That's for the Minnesota episode. I think Stefanski offers more promise, and so that's why I have him ahead of Zach Taylor. And then I have John Harbaugh, and you have John Harbaugh at 2. Yeah. So I really like John Harbaugh, and I'll say I didn't love Mike Tomlin before this last season. I had a lot of questions. I said, Look at the personnel he's always had. He's always had amazing personnel. Always had great coaches. When I watched Mike Tomlin coach this team last year to 8-8, which that team with a lot of head coaches that are good, that team would have probably been 5 wins at most.
Yeah, 6-10.
Mike Tomlin had them on the cusp of playoffs. So Mike Tomlin is a shot for one for me. I love John Harbaugh. I love both the Harbaugh brothers. I think John is a phenomenal coach. He's a special teams coach, which I think is kind of fun. That he's not a defensive coordinator. He was a special teams coordinator.
Yeah.
So I think that he fields a really good team. I think he fields the best team in this division, and I think that they're lucky to have him as a coach. But I think that Mike Tomlin is in a different, I don't want to say caliber, because I think that they're both in the same tier, but one's at the top of the tier, the other one's in the middle.
Yeah. I would put Mike Tomlin in the same category as I would put Mike McCarthy, in the sense of they are so experienced in this league that whenever you think they're going to have even a mediocre to bad season, they can surprise you any day of the week. So when Mike McCarthy went 9-7 or 7-9 7-9 with Brett Hundley, when he was supposed to lose every single game with Brett Hundley.
Brett Hundley ain't that good.
And Brett Hundley is not good at all, but still irked out 3 wins. Like, this was so impressive by Mike Tomlin to have a third string quarterback that the most
Duck Hodges.
Yeah, the thing that had the most claim to fame for him wasn't even his college football career, but instead his duck calling career. All right. And then moving into just the overall, it's not that hard to guess how we rank this one. We both had Baltimore at 1.
I think that this depends purely on your view of Lamar Jackson.
Yeah. But no, I actually don't. I think their defense is stacked. I think their offense is stacked. And really, with any mediocre quarterback, they could do well in
Yeah,
this.
but if you think Lamar is taking this massive regression, this receiving core is not going to be able to, I think, hold up to some stuff. I think that I think that the vast majority of people would understand that Lamar Jackson is very talented and that this team is the best team in the division. Unless you somehow think that, I think that there are 3 playoff contending teams in this division. But we agree, Baltimore at 1.
Yeah. And then you have, we agree.
We agree on
with all
this.
these.
It's that defense, that
Yeah,
Pittsburgh
Steelers defense is the reason they're number 2. I would give Cleveland the edge on their offensive weapons, but
we saw last year, defense wins you games 8-8.
Defense wins you games in the AFC North, and that's absolutely correct.
5-11, 6-10.
Yeah, it's defense wins you games in the AFC North, and you need it bad.
Wins you games everywhere.
Well, especially in the tough AFC North, where you have to constantly battle good run games in the cold North.
Yeah, and then so we have Cleveland at 3.
Cleveland at 3,
an exciting looking offense, promising defense, and an interesting head coach.
Exactly, perfectly summed up. And then Cincinnati has an upside. I don't think it's a very big upside. I have them going 4-12. I don't see them getting any more than 6 games this season. That's about it.
I'm excited for Joe Burrow. I hope Adrian Green comes back healthy, although I don't believe it. Their offense looks like it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. The defense just needs some help.
Exactly. So overall, as a recap, I think Baltimore is going to take this division and run with it the entire time. However, I think it's a huge help to this division in particular with the 7th spot addition to the playoffs. I think this division and the NFC West are really the only division that I could see 3 teams making the playoffs out of it. Possibly the AFC West with the Chargers, but that's it. I think the Browns overall this season have a good season. I think they'll go 10-6 minimum. I think their upside is 12 games. But them and the Steelers are really going to be battling it out for that wild card spot or that 7th spot, depending on if they could get their offenses going. I think that's their main things. Both of them have good defenses. Steelers better, but getting their offenses going is what's going to really be the trick of these teams.
Yeah, so, we've gone at it now here on 2 episodes, a little over 2 hours on it all. But to give a quick recap of where we ranked everything just so that you can walk away, or if you just want to skip to the end of the video, just hit like and subscribe. But at quarterback, we agreed Baltimore Ravens Lamar Jackson at 1, Big Ben in Pittsburgh at 2, Baker Mayfield at 3, and Joe Burrow at 4. We got Harry at wide receiver. I had Cleveland Browns, Cincinnati Bengals, Pittsburgh Steelers, and Baltimore Ravens ranked 1 through 4 on receivers. And Carl,
I had Cincinnati number 1. I just have so much faith in that receiving core. And then Cleveland 2, Baltimore 3rd, and Pittsburgh 4th.
Yeah, and then we rebounded on agreement with running backs and tight ends. In running backs, we had Cleveland, Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh in that order. And for tight ends, we had Baltimore, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati in that order. We finished off offense with the offensive lines. This was our other major disagreement this episode. Yep. I had Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Cleveland, and Cincinnati.
I had Baltimore, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati. So besides the last one, besides Cincinnati and last, we were kind of all over the place with that one. I think O-line is one of the more subjectives in these rankings, but I still do think that Baltimore is going to be the best out of this division.
Yeah. So then we moved to the defensive line. We agreed Cleveland Browns, Baltimore Ravens, Pittsburgh Steelers, and Cincinnati Bengals.
Yes.
Then we moved to linebackers, where we, again, a consensus agreement here. Pittsburgh Steelers, Baltimore Ravens, Cleveland Browns, Cincinnati Bengals. And then we finished off defense with the defensive backs, safeties, and corners. Baltimore Ravens, Pittsburgh Steelers, Cleveland Browns, Cincinnati Bengals. So that rounded out the defense for us.
Yeah.
And then we moved to our
coaches.
The third tier of a football team, your third category. You have your coaches and your overall here. And coaches, we agreed completely here with Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Cleveland, and Cincinnati. And then moves into our overall perfectly. Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Cincinnati. And as my co-host here and friend illustrates, this division has 3 really good teams. I'd say tight teams. I think Pittsburgh and Cleveland both could finish from 9 to 12 wins. We've kind of talked about the week. I think Baltimore could finish from 11, 12 to 16 wins.
Yeah.
So that finishes out for this. And as promised, how to circumcise your Shih Tzu. So what you kind of need to do is get a pint of butter and a hot knife.
Well, we want to thank you guys for sticking in for another round of this Pooch Cake podcast.
I'm Sam.
I'm Carl.
Thank you guys for listening. Hit like and subscribe, and find us on social media very soon at Twitter and Instagram. And we'll catch y'all on the next episode of the Pooch Cake podcast.